Hello, and welcome to the Simply Business Interview Podcast. I'm your host, John Jennings. And you've heard me say this before. I believe that most business owners are working way too hard for much too little. And one of the issues is that we over complexify things. And I believe that most of the answers are really lie within ourselves. We just kind of have to discover those. And so I think most of them are pretty simple. So I always say I'm a simple man with simple ideas. So today I'm joined by Katie Daniel, who's the CEO and founder of Ambition Fitness. Katie, thank you for being here. I'm really excited about hearing your story. I know our listeners are as well. So why don't you kick us off by just give us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. So, like you said, my name is Katie. I own a company here in Louisville, Kentucky called Ambition Fitness. And my business and my studio, we are in the boutique fitness studio or boutique fitness industry. And we have a studio that is all women's, and we focus on strength training for women. And the reason that we started is because there's so many women that want to do weights, but the weight section's intimidating. And then once you get there, you feel self-conscious. And then there's so many women that are like, I also don't know what to do once I get here. So we created a studio that is feminine, empowering. It's so clean. It's so chic. It looks like a nightclub. So you don't feel like you're in a weight section. And pretty much we made our own. So we do group fitness and personal training. And again, it's women only. So that's our niche.
Okay,
Um,
so I have to rule myself out right off the bat. So,
Unfortunately.
oh, that's awesome. So, what inspired you to do this? What was that initial spark that really?
Yeah, so I am my own consumer. And I think that's where we've also found strength and growth within our business. I never grew up an athlete. I never grew up in shape. I played like rec sports in like sixth grade, like just like every other kid. But I was part of the generation and like so many women who don't know how to feel good about their body. And society tends to tell women just to be smaller all the time. And my generation was told to do endless cardio and to basically eat lettuce. And that doesn't work for anybody. And I remember when Pinterest came out as a new platform, I just started pinning like these different like dumbbell movements and exercises came up, and I just made a little list and I took it to this like small mom and pop anytime fitness that was by my current job. And I just kind of put on my headphones and went to the weight section, and I had no idea what I was doing. I'm sure my form was terrible, but I just started kind of playing around with weights, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is something I actually really enjoy. And I was able to stick with it. And over time, you gain confidence in the movement. You see changes with your body. And there's just something about strength training that makes you feel so empowered. And I mean, men have known this forever. You guys are told to like lift weights and get strong, and then you feel like Superman. And then women start to tap into that and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. So it really changed my life. It taught me how to eat food. And so I was like, all right, like there's a need for women to have access to this within the market that they don't have right now. And so I really just kind of built what I would want as a woman, and it went from there.
Wow, that's awesome. So you didn't go to college for this. This wasn't your plan.
No, I was in medical sales before. So I do have a little bit of a business background, but really just in the sales aspect.
Yeah.
And having my own business you just learn so much that, there's no way to prepare you for it. And really just kind of by jumping in and learning as you go. So
Right.
I did have that sales background. It's funny because since I only went to the weight section, I didn't have a fitness background. I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I had never gone to a fitness studio. I'd never gone to Orange Theory, never went to spin. I don't think I'd ever even done a yoga class. So like I could have done a little bit more research and education before I did, but here we are, and it ended up working out. So thankfully.
And you've been at this, you said 5 years, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you started pre-COVID and fitness studios got hit pretty hard by COVID. So
Did,
that
yes.
has to
So
be,
luckily we were open for a year. And so we had time to establish a clientele and to build up before that happened. And then we were shut down for 11 weeks and then we just navigated it as best we could, just like any other business. So
yeah, awesome. Well, you not just any other business because you're one that survived. There's there's a lot that didn't. So
yeah, thank you.
congrats on that. So you kind of alluded a little to this, but what's the biggest surprise to you that as being a business owner? What was the biggest unexpected aspect of being a business owner?
Honestly, everybody says it and they're like, man, it will take you to your knees. It is so hard. And, I had this idea and I wanted to go after it. And I'm so glad that I did. But like, with any business ownership, there's highs and there's lows. And everybody tells you it's going to be an emotional roller coaster. And then you don't really truly quite comprehend the gravity of it until you're already on the roller coaster.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
someone could have told me, like, explained it so much more in depth, and I still would never understand until I was in it. So I think navigating the highs and the lows was most surprising for me.
mhm,
But if you're adaptable and you're passionate about what you do, and if you have a good service or product that your consumer wants, you can definitely navigate it. It's
yeah,
just there's a lot of curveballs that you catch along the way. So
yeah. You, it's hard to understand till you've done it, but you have that 3 o'clock wake up, in the morning where you start, this panic hits you, and every business
oh
owner
yeah.
I've talked to have experienced those,
The
and
lack of sleep is real for any business owner. Yeah, the first 2 years, but it's
yeah,
like a newborn baby. So
yeah, and yeah, it is 18 months is what I tell people almost universally. There seems to be plus or minus a little bit, but 18 months is that magic number that it takes you that long to develop the habits and the good experience and
yeah,
all
I
that
agree.
sort of thing.
This takes time, and
Yeah.
you know, I used to look at other big fitness studio names in the industry, like the Cycle Bars, the Orange Theories, like every other like big fitness name you think of. And in my first year, I would have to talk myself out of like comparison. I was like, Kitty, you cannot compare yourself to the Titans because those are outliers and you're not where they are, and that's okay. And they weren't this way all the time. So I think that was personally a good perspective for me to have to stop the comparison game in that first 18 months because it is just truly such a solo journey. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The comparison game is a real challenge for sure. We all deal with it because there's always, as you said, there's always the unicorns, right? But they're not the
And,
norm.
and the unicorns are outliers. That's what no one remembers. It's like, oh, look
Yeah.
what they did. It's like, okay, but like that's like the 1%. So,
Yeah. Uh,
and don't
very
get me
good.
wrong, our goal is world domination.
Of
So,
course,
no, we will be the 1%. But
you will
thanks.
be a unicorn someday. But
Yes.
it's great to have those goals. So tell us about we've already shared a little bit, but what's one of those challenges that boy kind of put you to the ropes and you had to and, you've turned around from now and look back and you say, yeah, I learned a lot about that from about me or about the business. Can you share one of those experiences?
Sure. I think two of my biggest challenges, uh, maybe not challenges, but things that I really had to learn a lot about to learn how to navigate it. One would be commercial real estate, lease negotiations, what you're walking into as far as how the process goes, what a landlord would want in a tenant versus how a tenant positions themselves attractively and what that process looks like.
Hmm.
Because with that also goes very hand in hand with construction drawings and a design process, and it's a big project. And that is tough to navigate when you're starting out and you really don't know the steps of it. That was a challenge for me, and then I think not necessarily a challenge for me, but something that I just became much more maybe aware of throughout my journey is that I really understood that your team is everything. But of course, like you're going to have some bad hires, you're going to have some people that didn't work out, and that's part of the process. It's no one's fault. and it's, really, really having a team in place that you trust and is very capable to do the job. And it's a symbiotic, like, two-way relationship of, it's, you care about your team and they care about you and your business and your consumers. So that is an ever learning, very, very integral part of the process for me personally.
Awesome. So you mentioned your team, and before we started the interview, you talked about how your team had matured to a point where you're not having to be there and deal with the day to day. Share a little bit about how that came about and what that feels like.
Yeah. So for the first 2 or 3 years, I would I don't think that my company would have been successful if I wasn't so hands-on with it. And I would say that to any founder. You have to live, sleep, breathe everything about your business. It truly is like having a newborn baby. It is totally dependent on you. Um, Sorry about that. I had a little uh, phone call come through, but she's gone now. So yeah, I think the first 3 years very important, that you are hands on, because also that's the time period to where you are truly crafting and curating exactly what your business is, and no one else can do that except for you.
Mhm.
My hands off point really came probably at that 3.5, 4 year mark.
Mhm.
At that point, the business had grown enough to where we kind of had the leverage of being an attractive business to the public and for people that wanted to work with the studio. And you don't really have that before. You have to grow that.
Right.
So I'd say around 3.5, 4 years is, I have a general manager now who she is exceptional. My trainer team and my sales team, they're just, all of them are tenured now to a point to where kind of when I go in, I'm kind of like, am I in your all's way? Sorry. But that transition really, I think, just came with the business maturing. Um, and and really for us to, John, I'm so sorry. I have my phone on DND and I'm not quite sure why it's still coming through. So yeah, I think it just comes with, as your business grows and becomes more attractive to an employment and consumer audience, that you really get that in your corner to get good talent.
Yeah. Cool. So you're at this point now that so many business owners dream of, that like you don't have to be there every day. So let's do the magic, the magic 8 ball, or the, what magic wand or whatever you want to say. Let's look out a year or so. What's next? But before world domination, let's dial it back to what's the next step towards that.
So it's funny you asked that, because I'm actively working on world domination. So I spent all of last year really developing our studio into a franchise model for franchise
Okay.
expansion. And that takes quite some time to really develop and really iron out everything to make sure that your concept, one, is validated by external parties.
Mhm.
Two, all of your QuickBooks, all of your profit and loss, your revenue, it all needs to be aligned. And your process has to, or your company has to be replicable. So we really looked at Ambition's performance, and we're like, okay, like it's checking all the boxes. And I there's a phrase about idle hands or something. Idle hands leads to bad things. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but like I like to keep busy, and so it's just I don't like to I like to have my hand in something, like
Mhm.
I like the creation, I like the challenge. So that's what I've been working on the past year. And the next steps for us is we are actively actually looking at new markets to enter into
Mhm.
and interviewing potential franchisee candidates if they'd be a good fit for it. We're also looking at opening a second studio in the east area of Louisville. So we've and I've found ways to keep myself busy. That's for
Yeah.
sure. And with the expansion, speaking of, if you have an amazing team in place, I can't wait for those pieces to fall in place to continue retaining that amazing talent for the company, and also for them to have job satisfaction and growth and development and promotion opportunities. So it's
Sure.
like I said, that symbiotic relationship is very important and valuable.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome that how growth leads to other types of growth, right? And
Yes.
so
Uh-huh.
you're going to be opening up, tons of opportunities once you move to that franchise model. That's going to
Yes.
really open up the doors for you.
That's the goal,
That's
right?
yeah, that's very cool. And so you're going to try to replicate your same model, women focused, boutique, very high end kind of special type place.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think that everybody on the team and our current clients are so passionate about it because we are our consumer. And so we know what women want. We know how they want to work out. We know how they want to utilize weights, like there's so many modalities out there and there's so many also like ways to do weights that like traditionally a bodybuilder or a strength training world is going to be more masculine and more male driven, and they're going to be like, hey, like this is how you do it, these are the rules. And we're like, oh well, we're going to kind of tweak those rules a little bit for how we would like to do it. So yeah, we know our audience, and we feel very excited to introduce that to women in new markets.
That's very cool. Very cool. So, if you're speaking to somebody out there that's thinking about starting a business or just in those early days or early months of their business, what advice would you give them?
I would say have it pinpointed to know exactly what you want to do. Like, what is it that keeps you up at night that you're like, man, I can't stop thinking about that?
Yeah.
And if you can't stop thinking about it, at least for me, my next thought was, well, I don't know how to do it. And then I was like, well, like what if it doesn't work? And I've heard a phrase of that a lot of people think that business owners and founders are risk takers. And a quote that I heard is that a good entrepreneur and a good founder is actually much more risk aversive than the general public would think. They think of every worst and best case opportunity, every or the outcome and everything in between, and be like, what do all those pathways look like? And for me, ambition, I thought about ambition for 2 years before I pulled the trigger on it.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, like I have to think of everything that could go wrong that wouldn't be in my corner. I mean, it is a big deal.
It is.
I kept being like, what if it doesn't work out? Like, what would I lose? Like, would we lose our house? Would they go to if I take out a loan, would they go take it from my 401k? And then I think it's easy to think that way, but then I just had this little thought that kept popping up, and I'm like, okay, but what if it does work? And what
Right.
if that doesn't happen? So I think that you just need to take time to really validate your idea, and do a lot of research on the best way to execute it. So
Yeah, and I hope listeners really appreciate that because you know there's something about kind of making sure you kind of understand what those guardrails are. That the worst case is this, best case is that, and don't don't live and dwell on the worst case. We talk about saboteurs in our brain, these voices in our brain that are constantly telling us all the reasons not to do things. And if you just unleash those, you'll never start the business.
yeah, and I was like, okay, like I was in medical sales before, like nothing in the fitness world. I was like, this would be a total change for me and my family and my husband and our household. And I was like, but like, I don't want to turn 50 or 60 and be like, man, I wish I tried that gym idea. And I'm like, you know what? What's the worst that could happen? Like, and then you just take the plunge, and once you take that step, there's kind of no going back at that point, but that's part of the excitement. So
It is part of the excitement for sure. And once you make that investment, I can relate. You're not. I remember during COVID, it was really easy to think, oh gosh, I should just give up and go do something else. And then like, no, I've invested way too much in this. I'm not,
oh yeah, for me
there's
it was like there was no choice for it to not succeed. I was like, I have an SBA loan, and who's gonna? No one else is gonna pay this thing off. So
right. Yeah,
it
the
was,
same way. I was like a failure. I use that from Apollo 13. Failure is not an option. That was a phrase I repeated to myself several times.
very much yes.
Very cool. Well, Katie, it's been great getting to know you, and I appreciate the wisdom and experience you shared with us today. If folks wanted to learn more about your business, maybe there's a potential franchisee out there that might be interested in this. How can they contact you? Where can they find you?
Sure. So our website is ambition-fitness.com. We have a very robust Instagram and social media as well, to where you can actually see the studio, kind of our modality, the client experience. So all of that is a really great point of reference, and all of my at least like digital point of contacts are on there as well. So we would love to have any women in the studio. And also, as you mentioned, it's a really exciting opportunity to be able to bring this to new markets. And I'm pretty easy to find once you're on there. So,
Very good.
and thank
Very
you so
cool.
much for having me. It was great to chat with you.
Great. Thanks very much for your time.
Of course.